Hello everybody, my name is InspirAspir and welcome back to part 3 of my Launchpad project tutorial series. In this part, I will teach you guys how to sample your song so that you can play it. That is, you can cut up your song and assign the sounds to each of the buttons on your Launchpad. So you press this button and maybe a drum will kick, or maybe like press this button and you'll get a nice synth. And that's how you can actually cover your song, right? You can press the different buttons. In the previous videos, we set up the Launchpad, and then we also created different pages using these 8 side buttons. So for example, this will be page 1, page 2, all the way down to 8. So we're gonna have 8 unique pages of 64 buttons. If you haven't seen those videos, you can go ahead and check out the description below, and I'll link you to the playlist where you can check out those videos and get caught up. So let's go ahead and jump right into this part, talking about sampling. So to start, I'd like to mention, if you have a song in mind that you want to cover, then I highly suggest you look up stems for that song. If you don't know what stems are, I'll explain that really quickly. If you look here in my Ableton session, I have the stems laid out for a song that I've made. Well, first it could help to explain what stems are. Stems are the individual layers of a track. So typically a song is made up of a lead, which is like a melody, made up of percussions, your drums, your snares, made up of bass, maybe some strings, some FX, vocals, that kind of stuff. And so in this particular song, I have this all together. And I also, if I were to check out each layer, I would have a set of leads, for example, which just sounds like that, or maybe my FX, so my cymbals, my builds, my white noise. Also have percussion, drums again, the claps, snaps. Bass line, which you probably can't hear because it's low FX. Yeah, it's just sub bass. Stuff of that nature. So all I'm trying to get at here is that I highly recommend you look for stems for a song if you want to cover that song. And I'll explain why in just a second. But first, I'll go ahead and show you a few places where you can check out stems. So I've loaded up a few pages here. For example, here's a subreddit that's called Song Stems. You can see it's r/songstems, where if you go, there's a lot of people who either request or drop off stems for a song. So you can basically go to that subreddit, to each of these threads, and people will have the stems, or again, these individual layers for that song. What having stems does for you is that you can play your cover like you normally would, and if you were to make a mistake, it's not that noticeable because you have multiple layers going on at the same time. Maybe you have like your chords, leads going at the same time. If you were to mess up the timing of one button, it's not as noticeable because there's background noise going on. Whereas if you just took the straight audio file of a song and chopped it up and you were to play it, if you were to have a gap, even the smallest gap when pressing your buttons, there'd just be silence. And that can be a bit jarring when you're playing your cover. So this is why I highly recommend you look for stems. Some other places you can check, there's this site that I found called remixpacks.ru. You can go here and they've divided it up into different genres. This is mostly EDM stuff, so a lot of electronic music, which is fairly common to cover on a Launchpad, so that should be right up your alley anyways. You can also check out Beatport, because sometimes they have remix competitions, and typically for remix competitions, the artist will give you the stems so that you can actually go in and edit each layer. But for this purpose, you can go to remix competitions, download the stems, and then use them in your cover if you'd like. You can also just, I showed here, I opened up a tab where you can look up remix competitions. Again, just emphasizing that there are different sites out there, like for Spinnin' Records, or for, again, Beatport, or there's remixcomps.com, stuff like that. And Splice is another good one where I know you can find a lot of stems. I'm not sponsoring any of these sites. I know for a fact that they often give good results for what you would want. So now that we know what stems are, we can go ahead and learn how to sample. I've gone ahead and as I showed you earlier, I've made a bunch of different tracks containing each of these stems. Now, if you were to do this at home, all you would need to do is right-click anywhere on this right side and select Insert Audio Track. And then go on your computer, find where your stems are. So for example, I had all of them stored here. Drag any of the audio files onto that audio track that you just made. And then typically you'll want a uniform BPM, so that way none of the audio tracks get warped or distorted. But on a Launchpad cover, the BPM doesn't really matter. If you happen to know the BPM of your song, it would be nice to set your BPM to that, because when it comes time to actually recording your song, you want the metronome to be on track. That'd be super helpful. But if you don't happen to know that number, that's fine. You can warp the audio file to match it anyways. I highly suggest you double click on your audio file that you dragged over here, and you go down here and you unselect warp, because that just makes it the normal length that it should be regardless of whatever BPM you have. So for now, I highly suggest doing this. So I deleted that track because I don't need that duplicate. So you can go ahead and do that. You can right click and select insert audio track for every stem layer that you have for your song. So now we can actually jump right into sampling itself. So I'm going to use, let's say, my leads right here for this song. Let's do... Right. Let's work with this section of the song for the tutorial's sake. So I have this portion of the song. So what you're going to want to do is, typically when you drag an audio track into Ableton, you'll go over here on the right side, and this drop-down menu should say probably mixer, right? Which we don't want, because when it comes time to right-clicking on your track, you get some weird choices that are only exclusive to this mixer mode. So you're going to want to go to the track that you want to sample, and over here, and make sure that this drop-down menu says none. So just left-click on that and select none. Now, that lets us go over on our audio track and click here where we want our audio to be sliced. So in this case, let's say I want this first page. Again, remember how we made 8 pages? Let's pretend that I want this first page, bottom left button. Let's pretend that I want that to be this sound. The dun. So in order to do that, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And by the way, if you don't know how to zoom in, you can go up here to the top of Ableton, where you see that there's this black rectangle. I'm going to click in that rectangle and hold, click and hold, and then just move my mouse down. Or alternatively, you can move your mouse up to zoom out. But again, I'm going to click on it, hold, move my mouse down so I can see the audio file a little bit better. And now I'm going to right click, or I'm going to choose the spot where I want my audio to start, right? So I'm going to left click so that this orange bar is where I want the audio to start. And I know that I want it to start here on this particular spot. So I'm going to left click so my orange bar is here, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose split, or you could also do Command E on Mac, like it says right here, Command E. I'm not sure what that would be on Windows, probably Alt E or maybe Control E. I'm not sure. It will tell you though, right, what the shortcut is. So all that did is slice the audio. You can see that there's a line right here. And I'm going to do that again when the audio stops, wherever I want that particular audio file to end. And that's going to be right here, right before this next big peak in the audio file. So I'm going to right click here and hit split. And so I just made my first audio file. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to unsolo this track just because I had it soloed so I could only hear that. And I'm going to go to my samples page. And this looks familiar from what we made last time, right? So I'm going to go into page 1 because I wanted to be on page 1 in this particular example. And I'm just going to press the button that I want this audio sample to be assigned to. And you can see in Ableton over here, this particular C1 button has lighted up, and so all I need to do is just drag that audio file that we made, or rather that we cut up, and drop it onto there. And now, when I press that button, I have an audio sample. And just to give you an example of what we made last time with the 8 pages, if I were to change to a different page, let's say page 2, and press that button, nothing happens, which makes sense, because we assigned it exclusively to page 1. If I were to go back to page 1, it works. Any other page? It doesn't. Great. So now I can go ahead and continue on with exactly what I was doing. I'll solo this track, because I don't want to... Otherwise I'd be hearing this, the whole song, and I'd rather not be doing that at the moment. So I'll solo my track and then continue where I left off. See how I left off right here? Let's say I want the next button to be this particular one, and I want it to be this sound. So it sounds like it ends right about here. I'll right click, hit split, and then I'm just gonna actually go ahead and chop up most of the files that I want, and then later on I'll drag and drop them where I want them to be. So now I'm gonna go back to my samples track and just drag the audio files that I made to whatever buttons that I want them to be. So I said, this button for the next sound. As you can see, it's this D#2 over here, this top right. I'll just drag that audio sample onto there. Let's say I want the next button to be this one, or the next sound, rather. And then, I don't know, here. And see, the fun part about making a cover is you can choose what sounds you want to go where. It's fair game. So right now I've made, right, let's say the next one can be here. The reason I'm just kind of going everywhere as opposed to just in a line is it looks a little more impressive when you're actually covering it, as opposed to, in theory, you could just go in order, like dot, 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 you know, just in a line. It's honestly up to you. And I made, this last one? Right, so now I made my first little segment of the song. And all you would have to do is just do that for, you know, every audio file for every part of the song that you wanted to cover. Let's just quickly show what it would look like to put an audio sample in a different page. So let's say we were to go to page 2, right? Maybe we wanted that to, I don't know, this button to have a drum. Again, I would just go to my stems and I would pick my drums layer, and which sounds like this. Super simple, very basic. I would probably pick one of these drums that's fresh in the open, just because this first drum kick seems to be muddled down with some sort of white noise, and so that seems to be a little bit clogged down. So I'll rather pick, I don't know, this section as just my kick drum. It's very basic, nothing too crazy. So I'll right-click here, and I have my drum. So now I'm going to go back to my samples track, and then this time I'm going to go to page 2. I'm going to left-click on page 2, and then choose my button that I want my drum to be. So let's say this one. All I need to do is drag that audio sample that I cut and place it right there. So now when I press this button, I have a kick. I actually think that should do it. That's all I planned on covering in this particular video. To review, I went over what stems are, again, the individual layers of a song, and why they're good, and that's just better for your covering. It, you know, prevents noticeable gaps in your song if you were to make any small mistakes. We went over how to actually sample your audio. So you make an audio track, you drag your sounds onto Ableton, you make sure that they're not warped. You right-click wherever you want the audio to start, right-click where you want it to end, drag that sound into your drum rack, and that's it. Those are the basics. With that, you can repeat the pattern for all of these tracks, for every particular sound that you want, and for every page of sounds that you want them to be in. And you just repeat this pattern until you have an entire song covered in here. So yeah, that should do it. That should cover the basics of how to sample. In the next video, I plan on covering how to make light effects using just the stock plugins that come with Ableton. Nothing to do with the MIDI extension device that I've covered a lot. I will teach you guys how to make lights using only these plugins, which can be useful if you don't have Max for Live. And so I know a lot of you have been asking how to do that, and I will cover it. Don't worry, that'll come out soon whenever I can get that part to come out. So thank you for watching. Hope it helped. Hope you stick around for the next part. If you stick around for the next part, I will see you in the next video.